Today, we're diving into a scenario that, let's be honest, gets people really fired up. It's about what happens when one person in a relationship invests everything in the other's success, only to see that success completely change the game. We're going to break down the story told in one single, really provocative question to get to the heart of the powerful emotions going on here. Let's get into it.
Okay, so here it is. This is the exact question that kicked this whole explainer off. I'm just going to read it to you word for word. Why successful wives leave their husbands after they start earning better income than their husbands who sponsored them abroad and put them through school, hoping it will benefit them, but she deceives their marriage and walks out of the marriage. That's a lot to unpack, right? It's coming from a very clear point of view. So let's try to take it apart piece by piece just to see how the argument is built. All right, so how do you even begin to tackle something that loaded? Well, what we're going to do is break it down into three main parts. You've got the initial setup, then the big shift in power, and finally the conflict. And just a reminder, the goal here isn't to take sides or to judge. It's simply to understand the story that's being told.
Okay, first up, the sponsorship dynamic. The entire foundation of this question is built on this initial arrangement. So let's take a closer look at how the source actually defines it.
So, right off the bat, the source uses this term, the sponsored spouse. But if you look closely at how it's framed, this isn't just about helping someone out. It's presented as a kind of joint venture, an investment made by the husband with a very clear shared hope for a future benefit. So this sequence here really lays out what the source is presenting as an unspoken deal, an implied arrangement. Step 1, the husband sponsors the wife's move to a new country. Step 2, he pays for her school. But honestly, it's step 3 that's the real kicker. The source doesn't frame this as a maybe or a hope. It says an expectation of shared benefit is formed. It's basically an unwritten contract that's holding up the whole relationship.
And this right here, this is the heart of the perspective. The sponsorship, the money for school, it's not being framed as a gift. It's being framed as an investment of time, of trust, and of money, all for a shared future. And you really have to grasp that framing to understand why the conflict we're about to talk about even happens. And this is where we get to the turning point. Because the investment, it actually pays off. The wife becomes successful. But that very success introduces a brand new factor into the mix, what we're calling the ambition variable. And, well, it changes everything.
Just look at this, the two realities, side by side. You start out with the initial state. The husband is the main provider, the sponsor. But then, in the new reality, the wife's income doesn't just catch up, it surpasses his. This isn't just a small shift, it's a complete flip, a total role inversion.
So this isn't just a story about the family having more money now. What this does is it fundamentally reverses those initial roles we talked about. The person who was once financially dependent is now the primary breadwinner. It's like the whole financial center of gravity in the marriage has just been upended.
And all of this leads us to the final and definitely the most loaded part of this whole narrative, the point of departure. This is the moment the marriage itself just collapses. So, you gotta ask, right? According to the person who wrote this, why does this departure even happen? Well, the text gives a very specific, very direct answer.
You can see the source builds a very clear chain of blame here. It says it starts with the wife's success. That's the direct catalyst. Then, it uses a really heavy word to describe her leaving, deception. And it all culminates in this final judgment, that her walking out is a betrayal of the husband's original investment in her.
And here it is. This is the central paradox, the main tension in this whole story. The very thing they were hoping for, the wife's success, the successful outcome of the investment, is presented as the very reason the partnership fell apart. In this telling, the success of the investment is what actually destroyed it. So there you have it. The whole narrative arc, at least as presented by the source, is now complete. It's a story that starts with an investment of hope, goes through this dramatic role reversal, and ends, from this very specific viewpoint, with a deep sense of betrayal and ultimately separation.
When you deconstruct this one very specific scenario, it leaves us with a much, much bigger question that could apply to almost any partnership. When one person's individual growth slams right into the shared history and the expectations of a relationship, what happens? And maybe the toughest question of all is, who gets to decide what, if anything, is owed? And that's the real challenge at the heart of this entire debate.